We start today with the biggest off-the-field news in the NFL. The Panthers have fired head coach Matt Rule after losing 37-15 to the 49ers yesterday.
Breaking news coming out of the NFL. The Carolina Panthers have fired head coach Frank Reich after less than one season. The Panthers hired Reich last offseason, but Panthers owner David Tepper is now changing course, with Carolina sitting at 1-10 on the year. That's the worst record in the NFL.
Coach Pierre here, and today I want to talk about why this Carolina Panthers rebuild just feels a lot different. I wrote an article about this exact topic, and I put it in the comments and the descriptions, so definitely go check it out. Since 2018, the Carolina Panthers weren't actually rebuilding. They were just constant resetting. They had a new coach. They had a new quarterback. They had a new system in place. They had the new vision, but the same problems constantly were happening. And honestly, I think that's why being a Panthers fan this last couple of years just felt exhausting. It wasn't because the team was losing. I am a fan who's been a fan since 1995. Teams lose. That happens. But the thing that was most frustrating was it just felt like nothing in the organization was actually connecting. Every offseason, it felt like the organization was just trying to skip steps. I think the Bryce Young moving up was a big example of that. They traded up to get Bryce Young in a very good quarterback draft at the time. And the problem was Carolina wasn't one quarterback away. This wasn't the Chiefs who had made a couple playoffs and just felt like they couldn't reach Alex Smith to get Patrick Mahomes. At the time, we were a bad team who needed a quarterback. But at the time, they felt as though, hey, if we get this quarterback, things would change, and it did not change. We ended up having the worst record in the NFL and missed out on drafting Caleb Williams because of it. It just felt as though, as an outsider, that the organization was searching for one move that could fix everything overnight. And the reality is the NFL isn't like that. Before this past season, Carolina was 44-89 during that time. That's not one bad year. That's just organizational instability. But for the first time in a while, I honestly feel like, again, this rebuild just feels different. Not because Carolina became a Super Bowl contender, and it wasn't because every roster problem just disappeared, but it just feels like there's an actual direction that this team is going. The organization finally feels aligned. And in the NFL, there's really only two ways you can build a team. You have the dynasty model. This is every fan's dream, where you think Tom Brady to the Patriots or Patrick Mahomes to the Chiefs. You draft a star quarterback, and then you just build your team around their strengths and what they can do. The quarterbacks have to be so good that they erase problems. The protection breaks down, they're able to figure it out. The receivers aren't separating, they can still create an offense. The play breaks down completely, they take over and just become the offense. But the problem is this: most organizations that build this way, they think they have the kind of quarterback that can actually be that guy when they actually don't. The two names I just said, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. One is the greatest quarterback of all time. The other one is, people call him the baby GOAT. So you have two quarterbacks that are easily top 5 of all time. 99% of quarterbacks will never reach those heights. And if you don't have that guy, building this way, you're just constantly going to reset. Most quarterbacks need a structure. They need protection. They need just basic stability around them. But then that's where the second model comes in. You have the infrastructure model. And teams like the Eagles and the Ravens, those organizations, they emphasize building through the trenches. They address their offensive line, their defensive line. They attack the depth, and they develop a culture of physicality. And then you notice something, even with those organizations, the quarterback play still matters. Jalen Hurts, say what you want about him, but he has been to 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl with an MVP, and played really well in his first Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, he's a 2-time MVP, possibly should be 3, has been named as one of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time, a freak athlete, but also a really good quarterback. The difference in those teams, though, is they don't ask them to solve every problem that pops up. The team and the organization do a good job of trying to address the weaknesses year after year. But then this is where Carolina just got stuck. They weren't patient enough to actually fully build through the trenches, but they also just didn't have the quarterback situation stable enough to build everything around that player either. And so you have a hodgepodge of disconnected with the new coach, with the new offense, a new identity, but the same results. But now, for the first time, there actually seems to be some alignment. Dan Morgan and Dave Canales feel connected in what they want this team to be. It's crazy that a former middle linebacker and a receivers coach have come together to have a clear plan on what this team should look like. And honestly, to David Tepper's credit, I'm really impressed that he is allowing those guys to be the football guys that he hired them to be. And part of me feels for David Tepper because I know he wants to win. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's braggadocious. He just felt, hey, I've been successful in these other fields. Maybe I can be successful in this. And it just didn't work out. So he's allowing his football people to be football people, and it's working right now. This just mattered. You're seeing it in the directions. Look at this offseason. They heavily invest into the trenches again. That is a pure football move. Monroe Freeling, the tackle from Georgia, that wasn't a sexy pick. You added some depth to the lead line, especially with Lee Hunter from Texas Tech, who I like a lot. You added some interior line help, the center from K-State, who, looking at him, I think he's going to easily start by week 1. None of that stuff is flashy. And yes, they added Brazil, the receiver from Tennessee, but it's not. But honestly, that's not the point. The point is to have your organization and this team stable and functioning. I view this draft almost like buying new tires. Nobody gets excited about buying new tires. It's expensive. It's boring, and you would rather spend that money on some exterior stuff, maybe a new paint job, maybe a new car stereo. But when that tread is gone, and you need to get somewhere, you're not going to be able to. Nothing. If the foundation isn't right, it does not matter how everything else looks on the outside. You're not going to go anywhere. And it seemed like for years, Carolina ignored that. Some of their older roster moves showed it. Xavier Legette, I like Xavier Legette. I still think he can possibly be the guy that people thought he could be. But when you have Ladd McConkey selected a few picks later, it's almost an indictment on exactly how this organization was operating. Ladd McConkey would have definitely fit better to Bryce Young's skill set. Bryce Young is a rhythm quarterback. He wins with timing, anticipation, and just quick processing. And Ladd McConkey played that style of football already in college, and he's definitely showed it in the pros. And early on, you could just feel the disconnect with him and Legette. Some of those routes took longer to develop. The third downs always just didn't feel like they were scheduled properly and executed. And again, that doesn't mean that Legette can't become a good player, but it just showed that Carolina wasn't building around what Bryce actually needed. That's why McMillan's selection, although a little risky because you're taking a receiver top 10, it just made more sense. Yes, he has that upside that Leggett has, but he ran crisp routes at his time as Arizona. He was a more polished receiver. That pick felt more intentional. It felt more looking at, oh, here's the upside that he has, to it was, hey, he's actually going to be able to help Bryce Young because he's a more developed route runner. And that's just growth in the organization. And then speaking on Bryce Young in of itself, I don't want, I'll say this gets a little bit uncomfortable saying, but Bryce Young improved. He did. I'm really, really excited what this year is going to come up for him, because for me, this is a clear make or break year for him and what this organization is going to view him as. But Carolina clearly shouldn't build their Carolina isn't building around him like he's Mahomes, like Allen, Jackson, or Burrow. They are doing everything they possibly can to support him, and with the offensive line, with the receivers. And even if you had those guys, you do, but it's premium positions and premium capital is the key. And it's smart too. At the end of the day, you have Bryce Young on a cheaper deal for a quarterback. So it's smart to invest on some of those more premium positions to help support him and to actually see if he can become the guy that was worthy of the first overall pick. Because if that happens, Carolina not only wins more games, but they possibly could become the next dynasty if that happens. And all you have to do is keep him upright. You run the football effectively. You play complementary football, and you just let the structure help Bryce Young and not just have one player save the franchise. And no matter what happens this season, I think Carolina has turned a corner. They've gone from bad to good, and now they can go from good to elite. They've gone from dysfunctional to functional, and that matters. Last season was the first time in a while that I actually enjoyed watching the Panthers play football. And it wasn't because they were perfect, but they looked physical, they looked competent and competitive, like like a good NFL team does. And even though they went 8-9, I was so proud of how they battled against the Rams in the playoff game, because they had a chance to win. They looked young, they looked inexperienced, and they just had a few positions that just were out of their depth in terms of talent. And I feel as though this offseason they did a good job of addressing them. And as a fan, obviously I feel like that's the minimum standard. Just I want the team that I care about to actually look like a good team. And of course, I want the Panthers to win the Super Bowl, obviously. But before you can become a championship team, you have to stop acting like a dysfunctional one. And for years, Carolina just didn't have a plan. They just hoped and it seemed like they would just hope and just magically pray and go, hey, this plan's going to happen and save this team. But they're putting their head down, they're doing the work, and that structure is what's going to take them to the next level. As a coach myself, when we first start everything in training camp and fall camp and, the off season, so on and so forth, the structure that we have is supposed to help build throughout the season. No matter what job you do outside of football, the structure of things is what allows you to be successful in the other aspects of your job. It's no different here. And so the question that I'm going to leave you with is whether they stick with it long enough to actually finish it. That is my one and final fear. Is the vision's there, but you just have to trust the process. And the process is good. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Peace.